I want us to applaud because she made it officially a panel and not a manel. When I say manel, is all men, but she officially makes this a panel. Let's appreciate Charity Kagwi-Ndungu for giving us officially a panel. Thank you, Charity. Charity, you are the current head of Anti-Corruption, Crime Prevention and Criminal Justice Program at the United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime Regional Office for Eastern Africa here in Nairobi, but you are also a prosecutor for the ICTR. And in the opening remarks and also in his introductory remarks on this panel, Prof has hailed Gachacha. And ICTR does not, or there are no good words, for lack of a better word, in terms of the work that it did, in terms of bringing justice to the victims and survivors of the 1994 genocide against the Tutsis. I'll give you a chance to talk to us today. What do you think has been the contribution of ICTR in the Rwanda we see today, 30 years later?
Thank you. And may I first say that ICTR was formed to basically hold those who were most responsible for the genocide. That meant the top cadre. That's why we had the Prime Minister who was tried, all the leaders who are like were seen as really leading during that time. What I do think that could have been done better was there should have been a much more consultative process when the world community, the international community stood up and recognized this is a genocide. A genocide requires a global response. It is the worst crime that can be done, and it requires a global response. However, at the table, Rwanda was not at the table to discuss, for example, how long, when would the crimes, the period of culpability, which they decided was 1994 alone. There should have been a lot more consultation with the country itself. I know it was difficult at that time. We can all remember post-genocide Rwanda, as Paul Kagame said, was he to decide to try everybody, put them in jails, he'd have to have a country of jails. And it was not feasible. But I think what the ICTR decided was to remove the whole top leadership, all the top politicians, all the top military leaders, everybody who was seen as the top. In ICTR, we had the whole top leadership of the military, the cabinet, of course, the richest man was also on the list of the people who needed to be held culpable. What I think is that it showed to the region that nobody is untouchable. And I'll tell you that because before, when we see rich people, important people, I remember one of them visiting ICTR when I was there, one of the people that in Kenya people were very afraid of. And he could see that there's a possibility that even he could go behind there.
There's a young generation in this room and they might not know who you're talking about.
I don't think I want to mention his name because he's a Kenyan. And perhaps it's not nice to mention his name right now.
Oh.
But they did realize that they too could be held accountable. Before it was winner takes all. And if you had the propaganda behind the genocide, they were saying, if we win, the world community will forget. That was what they were going at. And if they won, nobody would have questioned them. However, that winner take all is no longer viable. The world community stood up when there was a genocide against the Jews, and that's when the Genocide Convention came up. The world community could have done better for Rwanda, because at that point, I must say that they were so blind that Habyarimana's regime was still a darling of the donors. The French actually sent help to him during the war. There was a lot of help and sympathy going towards Habyarimana's regime, not understanding what was happening on the ground.
Yeah.
And then you see the response. By the time they wanted to say the word genocide, they were at the Security Council and they refused to use the word genocide because it would require a global response.
Yeah. But it's been 30 years. What lessons, what are the untold stories you can whisper to us today And just tell us that these are the things that stopped us, and today we've learned X, Y, Z. Because Prof said conventions and treaties are not enough. And here you say there was that convention that was born, but we still continue to see these atrocities. When we say never again genocide, do we really mean it? What's the missing link that would make us walk the talk?
I think what Prof said is people quickly forget history. History is all those 1 million lives that were lost in such a horrible fashion, the blood that was shed. In fact, I remember people were saying all the demons have left hell and they've gone to Rwanda. People forget the pain, the type of genocide this was, with crude instruments, and in such a fast fashion. People forget. And I think that's the saddest thing, because we should not forget. The blood was not shed in vain. If one of the books that we used to read at that time was part of the genocide story, was they wanted to kill everybody so that nobody could tell the story. Yeah, and that the story would be forgotten. We have to make a commitment that we won't forget the pain, the anguish of being raped,
yeah.
Being, watching people being decapitated, someone's mother, someone's father, someone's sister, someone's wife, children. And we forget, and I think that's the problem, or we think it would not happen to us. And that was my problem. Coming from Kenya, I thought, no, in Rwanda, there could be a genocide because there are 2 tribes, so one tribe can turn against the other. But in Kenya, we are 42 or 43. How is it possible to have a genocide in this country?
Yeah.
And then we saw the signs. Then we saw the signs it can happen anywhere.
Yeah.
And what was so terrifying was that you didn't think you could be a victim or one of the victim groups. And it suddenly looks, the story could happen at any time, at any place. Humanity is able to go down that path again, unless we always remember.
Yeah.